every day you get up and there's like something hits you in the face and okay, you gotta just keep going. You gotta figure out, here's how we're gonna deal with it and move on.
All right, good. Keith, thanks for coming in.
Great to be here, Wes.
Like a champion, known you for many years, and you're a guy that's been around Fort Lauderdale a long time, specifically in the banking industry, and I thought you'd be a perfect guest for us to go over what you're seeing going on in the world right now in banking in South Florida. Kind of an exciting time to be here. And, from the Army, banking many, many years. Was it your third startup that you're doing?
Second startup, third bank that I've been the CEO of.
Okay, so in locality, second startup, at a time when maybe some people might thinking about turning down the wick a little bit, you're full steam ahead with locality. Like, what's driving you? What is driving you in your day to day and wanting to build a new bank?
Yes, so it's a purpose in my life. It's when I think about what gets me out of the bed in the morning and what I see about going about my day, and it's really about helping local companies. And what drove us to start a bank, because I was 65, so as you said, where most people might be hanging up their cleats, I still wanted to stay in the game, and wanted to stay in the game in a way that where I could continue doing what I like to do as long as I want to do it. Which means, I've had friends who work in big banks who started in banking with me, and they hit 65 and they say, hey, sorry, there's the door. Here's your thanks for everything. And I didn't want to have that happen to me. Yeah. I wanted to continue on. And I think when I think back to why we started the bank, it was during COVID. And, we were talking before we got going here today about how you're doing the podcast during COVID, how different everything was. So during COVID, I had a non-compete. I was the CEO of First Green Bank. It was headquartered out of Orlando, and we built that bank up and we sold it to Seacoast. And that was in October of 2018. So as a result of that sale, I had a 2-year non-compete. And it was really an eye-opener because I definitely realized I did not want to not do anything. Yeah. I did not want to retire. I did not want to, I don't really have any real hobbies. I do CrossFit, and you can only do that for a very short period of time. And then what am I going to do the rest of the day?
That's considered a hobby, by the way, that abuse that you put yourself through.
But during COVID, it was clear, right after the PPP program, we all remember that. And so I had a non-compete, and my phone is blowing up as I'm just hanging out, by the pool with all these people that I had as previous customers saying they couldn't not only could they not get PPP money, they couldn't get a phone call. They couldn't get a response from their bank. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is pretty bad, So yeah. I was trying to refer people to other bankers that I knew to try to help them out. But my non-compete ended, I remember exactly when it ended, 10/20/2020. October 20th of 2020 it ended. And so I went to a lot of people in the community that I knew, like from the Broward Workshop, and basically said to them, do you want me to start another bank? Because I saw this going on. I saw a lot of, and it wasn't the big companies. Keith Koenig, God love him, he didn't have a hard time getting his banker to call him. AutoNation, they got all the money they need. But it's the mom and pop, and even you call mom and pop. I mean, some of these companies are doing $100 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the pecking order, they're not. And then when you get down to the small businesses, those people just don't get their phone calls answered when there's a crisis. So that was the impetus. We went out and we raised money from those people. They're all business people that own our bank, shareholders. I put up, personal money, and I asked them, I went to 19 people. I said, will you match, what I'm putting in? And that got us going with $19 million initial commitments. And then we ended up raising $38 million to get open. That was in January of 2022 we opened up.
Okay, January of 22. with so much going on post-COVID, I think that, banking is, especially in modern years, been highly regulated. Did you feel like it was bold at the time to be opening a new bank coming out of COVID and so much uncertainty? Or did you feel like these were relationships that you had? It was almost more sure bet kind of thing. Like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's never a sure thing, right?
Right.
Especially when you go out to raise money. You just don't know. And there had been a couple banks that tried, there was one that tried to start and they couldn't get the money raised just prior, about a year before we started. But having done it before, and then also I had 2 successful exits, so I felt pretty confident that we could raise the money. And I also felt confident in our ability to be able to satisfy a need. Really, when you start a company, particularly, you want to be solving a problem. And to me, that was a problem. And our mission is to empower local companies to maximize their potential. So it was really all focused on those local businesses that are underserved by larger banks.
Did you feel like you were a breath of fresh air, opening the bank and bringing these relationships back in that you had so many
I
of
still
over the
do.
years?
Every day, that's, and you ask what keeps me going. I mean, every day when I hear somebody saying, oh, this is what I've been looking for in terms of a bank relationship. We're so happy you guys opened up. Those types of things that we hear, that every day, that keeps us going.
So I would imagine for many of your clients that with you, they feel like they're a big fish in a small pond, right? Like they feel like they matter, they're important. Whereas to the bigger institutions, they're just a number.
Yeah, our client, we have a lot, we do SBA lending, as you know, because we've cooperated with you on some SBA loans. And, some of those companies are only doing $1 million to $2 or $3 million in revenues,
Yeah.
But we're able to lend to them through the SBA program. And, we love those clients. And they, part of it is as you've been in banking, it's getting them to then open their accounts with you and open those deposit accounts and then it becomes a real relationship where they're actually helping us by keeping their deposits there. We're lending them money, and then we both grow, and it's a great process. I mean, I just can't say enough about the whole community banking scene. I have to mention one thing too, because as I sit here with you, when I first started in banking, I worked at NCMB, which with Charlie Frankel, who's a good friend of your family, and one of the very first customers I had was your father and your uncle with the Ferrari dealership. And
I knew that. Hopefully you've got a few stories in there somewhere.
There's some stories there, yes, absolutely. And I remember because that was in the private banking group, and it was like the showcase when the guys would come down from Charlotte. They always wanted to go see the Ferrari dealership.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I was probably running around there in diapers at some point.
I think you were.
Charlie was such an incredible guy.
Oh, yeah.
And
a mentor to me, and just a wonderful, wonderful person.
He was larger than life in personality, but also in stature, right? Yeah. And he was one of those adults that always paid a particular attention to me, and as a kid, that leaves an impression on you. Yeah. Asked me about how tennis was and things like that, which isn't always the case, and you certainly wouldn't expect as a kid. And then as I got older, he'd tell me some stories about my uncle and him going to the Hurricanes football games and stuff, and the wild times that they had as following the Hurricanes in the 80s. Those were the glory days, right? And so that was that sounds like you got a great start, and you had some good direction there, which so let's talk about one of the things I got most excited about in the idea of speaking with you is that I think we share some commonality in the types of people that we service and that we work for, and that's business owners, right? And in a lot of cases, they're local. For me, I have a lot of local clientele, but national as well. But really, that empirical sort of experience of working with so many of them, some partnerships, some family businesses, and you get to see and pick up on trends of those who are successful versus those who are sort of good to great, that good versus great, and would just really wanted to dig in with you on, the business owners that you deal with. what are the commonality, like in terms of traits and attributes and practices that you see that stand out of those that really are successful and get ahead in business?
So by far, and I also have a podcast where I interview and talk with entrepreneurs, and so not just from the people that I've dealt with as clients, but also from some that I've talked to on my podcast. I think what I've seen, overwhelming characteristic of those that are successful, there's a lot of things, but I would say the dominant trait is perseverance. Yeah. Just they don't quit, because when you start a business or you are running any kind of a business, you're always going to be confronted with problems. You're always going to have something that hits you. I don't know how many people have seen Landman. Have you seen that on Paramount Plus?
Yeah, we're watching it. Yeah.
So I would say to people, like, I'm the Landman of banking. Like, it's like every day you get up and there's like something hits you in the face, and you gotta just keep going. You gotta figure out, here's how we're gonna deal with it, and move on. And Jocko Willink is a character who has a great saying. It's like when somebody would come to Jocko and say, something really bad happened. Mm-hmm. You go, great.
Yeah. Opportunity, right?
So how you frame things that happen that seem like they're disasters, how you frame that in your own mind, whether you go, oh my God, we're ruined, and what am I going to do? Or you go, great, like that's an opportunity for me to solve a problem and to learn something. So I think that perseverance and drive is the biggest characteristic that I've seen.
Have you read, is it Shoe Dog? Phil Knight's book?
Yeah.
That was like one banking crisis after the next for them. They never had enough money.
Right.
And there was a manufacturing component, a supply component chain issue too. But like, I read that book and I was like, that was like 15 banking crises in a book. And it's so true that he found a way to persevere through all that. And it's interesting looking back, because I knew none of that, and think that Nike was just this like golden child that never had any issues. And
if you dig into any of those success stories, you're going to find a similar, like, same thing with Starbucks. I mean, Starbucks very nearly, Howard Schultz's father-in-law. So he left his company because I forget where he's working for some company, and they gave him a 3 out of 5 on his rating, and he's like, I'm not a 3 out of 5, that's like, I'm not going to live with that. So he goes out, starts Starbucks. And his wife was basically supporting him, and she's pregnant. And his father-in-law comes to him and he goes, Howard, this is not working out. My daughter's miserable. You need to quit this Starbucks thing and, go get a real job. And so Howard's like, all right, I will. Goes back to his wife and tells her, that he's going to quit. She goes, you are not going to quit. You are going to keep going. So he owes Starbucks to his wife, telling him to get back out there and stay in the game. But I think, and there's probably a million other stories like that we don't know, right? But somewhere somebody had the perseverance and the grit to just like figure it out and keep going.
That's really neat. I love that. And watching the Masters this weekend, I think whether you're a golf fan or not, I think the Thursday Friday rounds actually got pretty abysmal ratings. I mean, it was 28% below last year from what I heard on the radio the other day, but Sunday's ratings were through the roof. And I can't remember a time where I saw a leader of a tournament falter like Rory did, but recover at the same time in the manner in which he recovered. Yeah. And I've been watching golf a long time, and that pitch shot he hit on 13th into Rays Creek, I was dumbfounded. And the announcer said he was aiming 25 yards to the left of where he hit that ball. And given that looked like the most scariest pitch shot I've ever seen in golf. So I'm not one to judge, but you just not used to seeing guys do that. Tiger had one like that on 18 when he won in 2019, and he executed it perfectly. And joke with your friends that ball would be in the crowd if it was me, or 10 feet in front of you with a big divot or whatever. Yeah. But that was so neat to see, and there's been a lot of conversation that's come out of that like, and somewhat Rory's comments that like, he's reminding himself like, I'm still winning this tournament. I still have an opportunity to win this tournament, and really it was up to him to do it, and he went to 18, and all he needed to do was make par, and he made bogey. Then he went back and played the same hole again and played it brilliantly. It was really refreshing and inspiring to see.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't have a particular feeling on Rory, positive or negative, but at that point I wanted to see him win, and he did, and that was such a cool thing to say and to witness. And I think that was really an interesting observation on your part. Keith, you see a lot more, I think, of the conversation in the business world, I think, around veterans and to how we can better help veterans, especially those coming out of combat, right, and how to getting integrated in society and finding their purpose in sort of this civilian world. Do you think that your service in the Army has helped you in any way get to where you are?
Oh, without a doubt.
Professionally?
Yeah, without a doubt it has. And I ended up in the military really because my family didn't have enough money to send me to college. So I applied for an Army ROTC scholarship. So it wasn't like I was saying, oh, I want to get in the Army, I want to spend my career in the Army. But it turned out to be just a wonderful experience for me in terms of, when you're 22 years old, we're all, some more than others, we don't know where we're going. I didn't know where I was going. So for me to go into that environment and have that type of leadership training, I was a young, officer, was incredibly beneficial to me in my career. I think so I was never in any combat. As I joke with people, I say the only fights I got in the military were in bars. But I'm fortunate for that because, we see what happens when people end up in combat.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's a tragedy how the veterans that come back that are war heroes are treated when they come back.
Yeah.
And there's such a high suicide rate.
Yeah.
It's really devastating. Anyway, I didn't mean to digress, but it does, there are a lot of groups out there that are trying to help veterans now. And I think it's, whatever we can do for that cause, we owe those people.
Have you done or seen the honor flight? And I'm sure you're probably aware of.
Yes.
My wife's gotten our kids and I to make posters and go greet them when they get back to the airport
awesome.
twice. And that's really something that the average person should definitely witness.
Well, I think what the Panthers do is just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys they're all veterans and obviously so patriotic, and recognizing some of those veterans, it brings a tear to your eye. And you see some of these old veterans get up, and they're just like, it's so meaningful for them.
I went to the recognition ceremony at the Panthers thing for Bob Arrington, and that was one of the neatest things ever. I mean, he served as a pilot in Vietnam, and just was incredible. And I love that they do it in the middle of the period, so it's not in between periods to where people are gone and out of their seats, and like you have their attention, and people were clapping, it seemed like, for 10 minutes.
Wow.
And so I'm like, we need more of that. And honor flight is such a neat thing. For those you don't know, they escort and chaperone these war veterans up to Washington D.C. for the day and walk them through all the memorials and stuff, and very emotional. And then when they come home, they have a welcoming and DJ, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people there gathering and cheering for them. And I'm reminded, because I wasn't alive at the time, the reception that many of these veterans got after Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And so this was like a long time coming for them, very emotional. You see a lot of tears, and a lot of ones that are holding them back, but not by much. And that's a really incredible thing. So, you talked about, on this show, we talk a lot about mentorship. Mm-hmm. And the first episode, when I reintroduced the podcast into the in-person version, I interviewed Bob Dennison, who's been a lifelong friend of mine and built up the largest yacht brokerage in the world and sold it. And he had shared with me one day, we were at lunch, he said his first day at YPO, he walked into his first meeting and he was greeted by one of his cohorts and shook his hand and said, who's your coach, your mentor? It was like, as if that was so like a common staple, and so we talk a lot about mentors in this show, and I've read plenty of books to know. Did you have a mentor? Did you have multiple mentors? What did they do for you or mean to you? And how did that help you get to where you are today?
So I mentioned Charlie Frankel, who really ended up, that's how I ended up in banking, really meeting Charlie Frankel and then working with him. He was a great early mentor for me and just a wonderful human, as you know, terrific person. And then when I left Nations Bank and I went to work at City National Bank, when Leonard Abbas owned it. So that Leonard Abbas, and it was a family-owned bank. And City National today is 25 billion, 20 billion, big bank for Florida. Back then it was 800 million when I joined it in 97. Yeah. And Leonard really was, had grown up in a banking family. His father had started the bank. And Leonard took me under his wing really and taught me, because when you work in a large bank like Nations Bank which is the predecessor to Bank of America, you know one little slice of that business.
Kind of siloed.
And you're just like getting loans and, whatever, working with clients. So I was educated on the entire, it was like going to school when I worked at City National, because I got to see how all the different areas of the bank worked. And it really opened my eyes up to community banking and the difference between working in a community bank and working in a large financial institution. And, it was clear to me that that was what I wanted to do, that I didn't want to work in a large organization, and I didn't want to serve, because previously I had been working just with, I was working in private banking, I was working with wealthy clients, and I felt like, you know what, these people really don't need me that bad, right? They can find plenty. It goes back to the same thing during, I was talking about PPP, right? The big companies, the very wealthy people have banks falling all over themselves, trying to help them, right? They all want, and it becomes a matter of, a lot of times, price, how cheap will you work for me? I thought to myself, I want those people on my side of the table. I want those people to be my investors in the bank. I want to be with them. And what I want to do is, I want to help the people who really need banking services. I want to help small, medium-sized companies that are underserved, that don't have 5 banks lined up trying to help them, and focus on helping them, because that, to me, is a problem that needs to be solved. And I think because we had done that in 2 other banks, we were able to convince investors to join us and to invest in what we're doing.
And so what do you think was your biggest takeaways from Charlie?
From Charlie, I think it was all about, like, Charlie really opened the door up about what banking was all about for me. I had been working at Merrill Lynch prior to that.
Okay.
And I went to, my timing seems to really suck. I went to work at Merrill Lynch in 1987, which, if people think we had a stock market crash lately, they've seen nothing. That was when the market dropped 25% on Black Monday.
Yeah.
And I was working at Merrill.
I remember that as a kid.
Oh, it was horrific. And, so I'm working at Merrill Lynch, and I'm also, at that time, nothing against Merrill Lynch, great company, and great training, great sales training, and I learned a tremendous amount. But what I found out back then was a commission business, and I also, it goes back to, do I feel good about what I'm doing? Do I really feel like I'm serving people when I am moving a stock from this, selling this to buy that, and no, you got to sell that to buy this, so I can make some money. Otherwise, I'm not going to make any money. And today that's shifted to a fee business, so it's not the same as it was then, but I didn't feel good about it. So I was working out at a gym. Back in those days, I was still working out early on in the Broward Financial Center, which is, that 500 Broward Boulevard, and at that time, that was like the newest, hottest building in Fort Lauderdale. Now it's like a relic. But I was working out in that gym. That's where I met Charlie, and we struck up a friendship, and he started talking to me about banking, and convinced me to go to work at what was then NCMB. And Charlie at that time was running all of Southeast U.S. for private banking, had a big job there, so he really took me under his wing and got me started in banking.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, for those who don't know, Charlie Frankel was a legend in the banking world and a very, very tall, very prominent man, very deep voice.
Great tennis player.
Great
too.
tennis player. You know, shake your hand and, you know, your eyeballs almost pop out. But very dear friend of my uncle specifically, but also my father. And, you know, my dad always tells me back then banking was different too.
Yeah.
You know, that just to have that relationship was critical for their growth because, you know, the car business is very capital intensive.
Right.
Real estate and parts inventory and used car inventory and floor plan. And if you're not borrowing money, you're probably not growing.
Yeah.
And Steve and Tom borrowed money. And,
Yeah.
you know, that they
I
were.
used to have to go count those Ferraris, man.
Yeah. and you know,
They're all here.
It's, you know, competitive market. I mean, Ferrari, obviously, they're more insulated than most other, you know, everyday brands. But so what about your mentoring? Is that a role that you undertake now that you've got all the experience under your belt? And
You know, so it's interesting. I have two co-founders of Locality Bank. So one is Drew Sato, who grew up in Fort Lauderdale, knows a ton of people here. A lot of people know Drew. He's the chief lending officer. And Corey LeBlanc is a guy from Louisiana who's our chief technology officer, chief operations officer. And we recruited him because we wanted to really create, we didn't want to just do a typical community bank because most of them don't have very good technology. We saw coming out of COVID, the heroes of PPP were community banks and fintechs. Those are the ones who got the loans done for people.
yeah,
It wasn't the large banks, although I'm sure they got some done. But it was just overwhelming, right? And the community banks got them done because they were using pencil and paper and working 24 hours a day. And the fintechs knocked them out because they had great technology. So we're like, well, we want to have better than average technology. We want to really focus on that because coming out of COVID, remember, nobody was going to a bank. Nobody's going to anything. So we wanted to make sure, so we came out and we said, well, we're going to be digital first. And what we've seen after 3 years in business is now people, they want digital, they want an app, they want all those, the online banking, but you know what? They also want to come see you. And it seems like more than ever, people are coming back, just like we're sitting here now. But anyway, that wasn't your question. Your question was really going back. And what was your question? I got spun.
Are you mentoring anyone now?
Am I
like, are you paying it back?
Yeah, so I was talking about these two guys. So to some extent, you know, those guys are, I'm 68, and those guys are in their early 40s, you know. So to some extent, bringing those guys in because, you know, how much longer am I going to work at the capacity? I'm working pretty hard right now. Like Jamie Dimon says, I'm working 7 days a goddamn week. I don't know if you heard that, but
No.
that was anyway, I'm digressing way too much. I'll keep going. So am I mentoring those two guys? You know, to some extent, yeah, because I want them to be able to take over this business. Yeah. I'm not going to, you know, maybe step into, I still want to stay in the business, still want to stay involved, but right now I am working really hard and you know, I'm 68. I don't know how long I can keep up that, probably another 5 years or so. But, you know, I like working hard, but at some point you just, you know, you can't conquer age. So other people, I had a guy reach out to me who is like 28, who knew my daughter, Hallie, because my kids all grew up here. And he's a guy, he was on my podcast. He started a clothing brand called YIFNO. And YIFNO stands for Yo, It's Effing Nice Outside. So
Wow.
that is his brand.
That's a real acronym. Okay.
He came up with it, and he came on, and he has done these pop-ups where you go in and you sell merchandise, and he's done them like all over the world. He's done them in London and New York, and very entrepreneurial young man. And you know, he's given me like the clothing is really cool too. It's like he brought it in. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna wear this. I'm wearing the YIFNO stuff all the time now. I got it, you know. So I was really impressed with him. So he asked me to mentor him. So I'm gonna start that. I also told him, I said, so at first I said no, because I said I got too much on my plate. I really can't mentor anybody. And then I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? This guy's really entrepreneurial. So I said, you know, I'll mentor you. Nick Wutcher is his name. I said, Nick, I'll mentor you, but I want you to do something for me. I want to start an emerging leaders group at Locality Bank because I want to reach that generation. I want to reach those 20 and 30-year-olds. And we'll start an emerging leaders advisory board. And you've been to our advisory board meetings.
Yeah.
You're on our advisory board. Well, I want to start a group like that with 20 and 30-year-olds. I said, Nick, will you help me? And of course, I recruited my daughter Hallie to do it too. I said, because they know all these, 25 to 30-year-olds who are starting their careers. So that was how, and so I said, yes, I'll mentor you, and you guys are going to start this group for the bank too. So
That's
I'm looking
neat.
forward. So I haven't started with
Yeah.
him yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's really neat. I find that, and I'm 48 years old. I'm pretty proud of many of the things I've done in my career. There's definitely some things I would have done differently, but I think that there's an incredible appetite out there for people who really want to learn, and I've learned that by giving my time to some people that have asked for it. That there's way more of an appetite for me to help people than I would have ever thought. And because there's just so many people out there who didn't, maybe even if they did have a father that was involved in their life, maybe they weren't in business. They didn't have the skill set or the knowledge that was helpful for them. One of my guests stood here a few months back and talked about his mentor that he started with when he was a kid, because his dad was a taxi cab driver and had just emigrated to the States when he was a kid. Like he just didn't have that particular aptitude, even though he provided and he was a great father. So it's really been an eye-opener for me that there's a lot of people out there that would really be appreciative of your time and energy, even though you may not think it's as valuable as it really truly is. And so that's been a really neat revelation for me, because I look for those meaningful connections, really to help people. And if they find value in it, then I'm willing to spend, some of my time to do that, because I was really fortunate. I have a great father who was very successful, and he had a lot of friends that took interest in me and helped me, establish my footing. I mean, when I became a mortgage banker, one of my, pretty much my first career at 22 or 3 years old, a lot of his friends came to me, and I helped them purchase their house and refinance it. They didn't have to do that. Right. They had friends too that were in banking. I might have stole some business from you, Keith, but they were just trying to help a young guy out. But I think you made it right. But I wanted to touch back on back up a little bit. I asked you about the attributes that you see in successful business owners, and you talked about their perseverance and sort of relentlessness. What about blind spots? What do you see in business owners, sort of empirically, that you see that's maybe a common blind spot that could pay more attention to and raise some more awareness? Because that's kind of a lot what we do on the podcast, is really some takeaways and things to think about, and building value in that business and de-risking the business. And does anything in particular come to mind that you see?
Well, I think that the older you get, I think the more you that I've experienced is I definitely when I started my first bank, I definitely had a lot of blind spots. Mm-hmm. Not that I still don't, but what I did, and you mentioned YPO, mm-hmm. So I joined a Vistage group, and that's a mentoring as well. Yeah. So I've been a member of a Vistage group since 2010, since 2009 actually, when I started my first bank, and that has been just such a valuable experience for me, because you really build such great relationships, and they're honest, open, candid, so that people in our group, we call each other out. Like if somebody is saying something that, hey, wait a minute, how are you going to do that? Or we question each other, we hold each other accountable for the things that we say. So I think that has helped me immensely. So, and I've noticed also a lot of the people that I talk to have those types of groups, either EO or YPO or Vistage, some type of a mastermind group like that.
Yeah, we even had a meeting at your office one day with just some various different people that in my sort of circle of influence, Drew was there as well, from your bank, and we just talked about, the world is changing so much from a technology standpoint that, how are you winning new business? And I was really curious and I invited people there that I know and respect that that are out there winning business and always looking to evolve and reevaluate what they're doing. Is this working or is it not working? Am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I getting in front of people? Am I picking up the phone instead of texting or emailing or doing those things? And that was really, really helpful. I mean, there's some really smart people out there that you might rub elbows with and not even know,
Right.
Just how disciplined and how determined they are to be successful. And you don't know because you don't ask, and so that's kind of part of what we do here is just asking the questions and learning. And it's the part that I probably enjoy the most about the podcast is it's not about me or what my journey is, but about yours and just learning, about what works. And I love also hearing what's changed and what is changing and what hasn't changed. I think that I value face-to-face communication more than ever. And I can tell you there are times in my day where I'm like, I get ready to send a text message and I said, you know what? This is a phone call or this is a face-to-face conversation. This is not meant for a text message. And I think that's probably the one thing that the younger generations probably need to grasp. And, when I'm talking to my kids' school in the business class and saying, hey, some things you guys are already ahead of the game on. Technology is your friend if you use it in the right way, but other ways, sometimes you got to do this face-to-face thing, right? And so I want to hear about philanthropy. I know you're involved in a lot of nonprofit sort of causes and have been over the years, and I know some of that might evolve and change, but what are you involved in now? What is your passion and why?
So I'm involved in some philanthropic organizations, but I'm also involved in a lot of trade, like I'm involved in trade organizations as well. So a lot of different commitments that I've made outside of the day-to-day. So, United Way, the Alexis de Tocqueville Society, I've been a member of that for years. I've been a member of St. Anthony's Church for, my kids all went to school there. Still a member of that parish. I'm a member of the Broward Workshop, board of the Broward Workshop, the board of, I'm the incoming chair of the Florida Banking Association. So I'll start that. I become the chairman of the board of that organization in June. Trying to think of what else. There's a bunch of other ones. Chamber of Commerce, we're trustees of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber. I'm past chair of the chamber. Put me on the spot here. I should have written these down.
Let's go with your gut.
Yeah.
What are you most passionate about in terms? I mean, I know United Way does a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to organizations to support, and we support a bunch of organizations through the bank as well. So personally, when it comes to organizations to support, I've committed to United Way just because that covers so many organizations, and they're all good. I've never never met someone with a nonprofit who's not passionate about it, who's not doing good work. So by giving to United Way, I think that's a great way to do it. Oh, I forgot my latest. So this is a big commitment. So I am kayaking in the Keys. I did this last year. So a good friend of mine, Oscar Ortiz, lost his son at the age of 15 to cancer, and it was heartbreaking. And what they went through is it's horrible. Oscar quit his job. He had a job with Crow, a huge consulting accounting firm. Quit his job and started a charity called Sebastian Strong, named after his son, to raise money for pediatric cancer research. So, and he started this event, which I did last year, which is to kayak from Key Largo to Key West over a 5-day period of time. So, and I did it 3 days last year. This year I'm doing it for 5 days, and we raised over $30,000 last year for that. And this year my goal is to raise $50,000. So check my page, LinkedIn, or you'll get an email from me. But that's a great cause,
Yeah, sure.
and I want to raise 50,000 for that one this year.
That must be emotional to be a part of that.
Oh,
And
it was
you're,
it was just unbelievable. And when you land and they bring the families to Key West for the landing, when we
I
all
can't
come
imagine.
in, and to see those kids and their families all together at the end is just, it's unbelievable.
You don't think about losing your kid at 15 to cancer.
No, no.
It's great of you to do that, and must be emotional for him to see his friends band together and help
Oh,
out for a cause
absolutely.
and do something which is a pretty big deal. And kayak from Key Largo to Key West. How long? That's, I mean, that's a long shot.
Yeah, it's 110 miles.
It's long to drive.
Yeah.
You're always behind people. I mean,
We do about 30, 25, 30 miles a day, and then
Yeah.
stop and keep going.
That's incredible. That's probably a pretty good segue into the next section, which is talking about your dedication to fitness.
Yeah.
I think one of the first times I got to really hang out with you was when we did the Rio Fit thing, which I think
It's amazing how many great people I
Yeah.
met through Rio Fit. Should have some type of reunion of those guys.
I mean, that was such a neat thing for those that don't know. Rio Fit was a competition amongst local, I would say, professionals, ranging in age. When I started, I was 29 years old, and I'm 48 now. So, I know you.
think I was
So you were
48.
in your 40s, early 40s, right? And I mean, at one point, there was probably 50 of us, week-long competition, some strength, some endurance, some speed. And I remember doing that first one, and it was humbling.
Yeah.
But it gave me a lot of motivation because I think we did them about every 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So you had a lot of time in between to really get your game,
Yeah.
up your game. And over the course of those 4, I never won most improved, but over the 4, I improved very steadily, quite a
Yeah.
bit. And that was all, I think, really all about pushing yourself past your limits, but also really more than anything, not making excuses.
Yeah.
Finding the time to dedicate to your fitness and
Yeah.
your well-being, because at some point you're not in control of that destiny anymore. So that was a really neat thing. And being around a lot of great guys like you, and I can tell by some of the limited social media postings that it's still, and looking at you, it's still a big part of your
Yeah.
life. And so you're a CrossFit guy. Tell me a little bit about your routine and kind of.
So I usually go at 6 in the morning, and there's a CrossFit gym that's very close to our location on Andrews.
By your office.
Yep.
Right.
So I hit the CrossFit gym at 6, and then we have a shower at the bank. So,
Oh, yeah.
Just head over to work afterwards and start my day. So yeah, it's amazing. An hour,
Mhm.
and you go through such a hard training. I don't know how many people are familiar with CrossFit, but yeah, it's a really difficult workout. So it's kind of like you start your day that way, and it's like, I'm ready for anything.
And I could imagine that does so much for your focus too,
Oh yeah.
right? Just energy wise and focus, and adding that, diet, I'm sure is a big part of that too. But I find that especially when there's a cardio component, I feel like, to me, that's kind of like the light switch that goes off. I feel so much more focused and less distracted when I've had some cardio component. I enjoy the weight part too. That serves a purpose and has certain benefits. But I mean, in CrossFit, you're doing both. You're
Yeah.
pushing around a lot of weight, and your heart rate's through the roof. So
Yeah.
I can see why there's so much appeal to it in that sense. But the camaraderie around it, and there's a commonality with, so many of the other CrossFit gym boxes are doing the same workout, right? And
Yes.
so, it's a topic of conversation and comparison and what have you. Do you think that your mindset and pushing through that, I mean, is that something that you think is part of your personality? Because those workouts are hard. I've done a lot of them, and it's almost a little masochistic in a way, like you're just beating yourself up a lot. I mean, is that part of your personality, you think? Is that
I'd like to think I'm not a masochist, but
I mean, that was a little tongue in cheek, but like, yeah.
But I would say I've always considered myself a very disciplined person, and so really throughout my whole life I've been like that. So even when I was in college, and I was a boxer in college,
Yeah.
and I was like, I would I was always just very disciplined about it. And part of my whole life, fitness has always been a part of it for, as long as I can remember.
So boxing was your sport then,
Yes.
right? I remember our little like boxing thing that we had with you and Brian Mahoney, and you had a torn bicep and you had to strap it in, and we all like might have had some action on that,
That was
that whole
crazy.
thing,
Yeah.
and
When I think
that was
about
kind of
that.
fun. We raised it for charity.
We
I
raised
think,
money
right?
then. Yeah.
And you could have won a free chicken dinner or something if you would have kept all that money. But would love to move along and talk a little bit about really the cutting edge sort of banking world, specifically crypto, AI, which is certainly goes well beyond banking. Where do you? I think, at least my perception as an outsider, is that crypto is sort of settled down a little bit in terms of where we see the long-term use of that. I'd love to hear, kind of what your thoughts are on that, if it's impacted banking at all, how you see regulation of that in the future. I know that there was talk of a digital, currency from the government, from the U.S. government. So we'd kind of be curious to some of your thoughts on that.
So it's interesting because with the Florida Bankers Association, we go to Washington on a regular basis. So we were just up there in February, and so now the leader of the Financial Services Committee is Congressman French Hill from Arkansas, who is a community banker. He started a bank there and sold it and was very successful. So you have a legislative. The people in both the House and the Senate now, who are leading those committees. The Senate Banking Committee is also led by Tim Scott now, who's a Republican. Those people are very pro banking, and French Hill has said, "I want to make community banking great again." So, from a legislative standpoint, we've never been in better shape, I think. So where I'm going with that is both of those committees have stablecoin bills that are being heard, and there is bipartisan support for a stablecoin bill. So this is really early in the session to have this much interest in a stablecoin bill. And so how will it affect banks? I think mostly, if you think about a stablecoin, it's a digital currency that's pegged to the dollar, right? So you don't have the wild fluctuations that you have like with Bitcoin or Ether or something, Dogecoin. So it's a stable currency, but it's digital, so that you would be able to. So I think for payments, it's coming. We're going to be using blockchain technology for basically to transfer money, I think, sooner than we think. So from our standpoint, as a small bank, we want to be on top of that. We want to be looking at that. And I think also the other thing that we could do with digital currencies is there's no reason we couldn't have a wallet. There's no risk to allow people to store digital currencies. So that's something also that we could possibly do. That's, at least you're making that available to your clients as more and more. And it's not like I have no opinion on Bitcoin or digital currency in terms of whether it's a good investment or not. I think it's very speculative. I think anybody would say it's a speculative investment, but there are people who want to hold it. If they want to hold it in, at least you have a facility for them to store it. And there's no risk to the bank in doing that. So I think there's a couple things that we could look at there with digital currency that are very interesting.
Historically, moving on to AI, my perception of innovations like AI in history, where it has made it easier to do a certain job, if not completely handle the job task. I know there's been some fear as to, well, it's going to take certain jobs, and what are we going to do with that, rather than understanding that, like farming, for instance. I mean, hundreds of years ago, families were doing, growing their food and making their own clothes, and we're we're clearly far better off as a result of free trade and letting, people specialize in that. And so, is AI going that direction, you think, to where it's going to take over a lot of our menial tasks and things that, let's say, we talk about it taking over customer service jobs now, and probably not the most desirable jobs in the world, where we're going to find other uses for these people that may be more fulfilling and make our society better and provide more, or is it truly going to displace? Obviously it's a huge disruptor, right? And it's evolving so quickly. Like, I'm curious as to how you see this being potentially a net positive or a net negative. I think most inventions and innovations over history, environment notwithstanding, have improved our way of life and our quality of life, right? And so just curious as to kind of what your take is on that.
Yeah, so I think it will improve our quality of life. I think that it will allow people to do more. And the way I've represented, so we're doing, actually, we received a grant from Career Source Broward through the state to do training for our employees on AI, because they don't want to see it displacing people, right?
Yeah.
They want to be able
Sure.
to use it. And so by better enabling people, so the way I've represented it to all the people that work at our bank is, this is a great opportunity for you to have an AI assistant be able to do the things that you don't want to do, that are, just as you were saying, the
Sort
kind
of
of the
menial.
drudgery, the
Yeah.
menial, and you can focus on the fun,
Yeah.
creative, working with customers, doing the things that really are meaningful. The thing that I'm interested to see what happens, because at some point, does AI begin to replace higher level human function?
Yeah.
I don't, it's never going to, well, I say never, who knows? There could be a bot here,
Yeah.
or a digital Keith AI bot.
I don't get
It's
the
not
real
even
Keith, but
me.
I get the digital Keith. So he's a little more affordable. So maybe that works.
But who knows? Where it'll go, and then you have people who spread these, and I shouldn't say spread. I think there are people out there who legitimately believe that it's a huge threat to humanity. So I don't know. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about almost everything. So
Yeah. Yeah, I got finished reading a book called The Rational Optimist, which, after being recommended from like the 10th CEO that I read about, I decided to read it. And it's all about basically saying, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, everything that we've achieved in human civilization over the last 2,000 years or so has all been in the result of collaboration. And you think of competitive and comparative advantages, all about that specialization, but working together. This iPhone is the result of thousands of people collaborating.
yeah.
From sourcing and mining the materials to assembling it, to building the software, to the updates and transporting it. There's no way this would ever happen with one person, right? It's collaborating together. And so to me, is AI just another evolution of that, us collaborating and becoming more efficient at what we do. Yesterday, I was implementing a new CRM and project management software in one called Pipedrive. And I was having an issue with importing some of the data that I had. And I've created an assistant, like basically a duplicate of me in ChatGPT, a paid version. And I got loaded all of my periodicals that I've written, all of my training materials, a lot of the deliverables and the financial models that we've built as a team. But I went in and asked it, I said, I'm having an issue with Pipedrive. And it walked me through all the steps. It took like 15 minutes. It ended up being a glitch with the browser. But how did that? It knew, even though these two pieces of software are not related at all. Yeah. It walked me through how to handle all of it. At one point I got frustrated. It was like, hey, calm down, you're almost there. Like it becomes my therapist, But it's incredible in how much it's helped me in my podcasts and just coming up with ideas and organizing thoughts, and how much it's helped with, now it's helping with financial models. It's helping do a lot of the things that would bog me down traditionally. and it's really quite incredible. And so to your point, I'm very optimistic too. I think like anything, there could be some negatives to it, for sure. And I'm hoping, legislatively we could find a way to put some guardrails in place that might be necessary. But overall, I think it's been a hugely valuable tool to use, and I would think we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I'd love to ask you a few more questions, kind of like as we get sort of the tail end. What is, you've had a lot of success in banking. You've got an opportunity to talk about, what is success to you in life as a professional, as a dad, as a husband? What do you see as success when you get done with this, whenever you cash in your chips at, a year from now or 10 years from now? Like, what do you look back and say, I think I did it right?
Yeah, I think where it's interesting. So I don't know if you ever read any Marshall Goldsmith's books.
No.
What got you here won't get you there. But he's got a lot of good books. And one of the things he says is, as you anything that you do in your life is to put it in the frame of what if my 90-something-year-old self was in my deathbed, how would I look back on this? And when you frame your whole life that way, it really puts everything in perspective, because a lot of times we may get so bogged down in like some menial thing at work, and we forget about our family. We forget. Now my kids are all grown up now, but it's so important, like when you have young kids, and like Drew, and well, Corey's kids are grown up too, but Drew's got young kids at home. So there are times when Drew's like, oh, I'm like, Drew, that's the most important thing. Take your time with your kids, because the business is going to be here. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, right.
So I think, so really for me at this point, it's knowing what your purpose in life is. Why are you here? Why am I here? And I feel like I know that, and I feel like I'm getting out of bed every day and doing that, working on my purpose. And my purpose is my work, my family, my faith, and also a little CrossFit.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So I feel like it's not like looking back, I'm going to be, I feel like a success every day when you frame it that way.
Yeah.
Are you working on your purpose?
It's always helpful to remind yourself, and sometimes it takes different ways to do that, or different moments or conversations or experiences. But I saw this really amazing quote the other day from William Shatner. And I guess he recently made a trip up into space. And, obviously a guy that was in Star Trek for many years.
I thought he was in space all the time.
Known for that. And believe it or not, they did not film that in space. He said, it was kind of interesting, and I probably won't do it justice, but he was like, people made such a big deal about going out in space and it must be so fun and so adventurous. He goes, I found it so incredibly lonely. But so mind-blowing, and just the expansiveness in space and the darkness and the emptiness of space. And he got back home, and he was like, it made him appreciate so much this world that we have, and at the same time made him sad that so many of the things are happening that are, with the environment and obviously conflict and things of that nature. But he's like, man, what we have is such a precious thing. We really, that was such a reminder to him. And I thought, well, what a neat thing. I certainly don't know if I'll ever make it to space to get that perspective.
Yeah.
But that was a really, really neat quote and introspection from him.
Sure.
And so, like, on that same note, you got an opportunity to tell your 30-year-old self something. What do you think that would be?
30-year-old self, it would be really the same thing I just said. Really view your life, like write your obituary.
Yeah.
Look at your life from a long-term perspective. I think a lot of times we get caught up in the short term.
Oh, I'm 100% guilty of that. So I'll just go ahead and take that from my 48-year-old self. This is one of my favorite ones. I don't always ask it, but I think I gave you the heads up. If you had a billboard that could say anything in the world, what would
you
it say?
did, and I'm such a simple guy. Like, you were expecting something profound. My billboard would say, welcome to Fort Lauderdale, home of Locality Bank.
Yeah.
Because I want to get that billboard. I'm going to do it at one point, right by the airport there. I think they've got
Yeah.
like a Hooters sign on it now. Sorry guys.
Yeah,
We're gonna have a
if it's got
Locality.
a Hooters sign, that's probably coming down at Chapter 11. Just kind of the last few questions winding down. Are there any books that have shaped you personally or professionally?
I was hoping you would ask me that. There is a book that anybody who is an entrepreneur, business owner, it's a must read. It's called Beyond Entrepreneurship. And there's a Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. So everybody's heard of Jim Collins, Good
Yep.
to Great, which I love all those books Jim Collins did. This was the first book that they wrote. Him, and I can't remember the co-author. It was him and this co-author. And they wrote it early on. And it is such a great book. And so what Jim Collins did is he took that book that they wrote back then and he did a 2.0, he updated it. So it's on Spotify.
Okay.
You can download it. I listen to it almost every day. I listen to it over and over and over because the lessons in that book are so applicable and good.
Well, now I have to listen to it.
You have to.
It's
I
like
mean,
the most...
it is, at least do it once. I've told everybody I work with too. It's like, it's incredible.
Keith, that's the most convicted you've been with any of the questions I've asked today, so I think this is a great time to end.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Wes.
Thanks for
I had
coming
a lot
on.
of fun.
It's a pleasure spending time with you.
Thanks
and
for the
hearing more
bourbon.
about-
I know, but this is not water. This was bourbon we were drinking.
Yeah, straight 120 proof bourbon. So
All right. Thank you.
thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Let's get this in here out of the way.
That's we're
Yeah.